Thank you for joining us, Mr. Stone.
Alex, great to be back with you. I'm calling from the New York bunker today, where I'm hunkered down in front of the computer writing.
Well, you've got the floor. Thank you for your time. Tell us first about these polls. And I know you like to be too optimistic, but this is pretty exciting. Let's get into your article in Town Hall.
Sure. I think it's very important to understand the dynamics of this election. In Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, you have very polarizing figures who have great intensity among their supporters and great animosity against their detractors, those who are opposed. The country is fairly evenly divided between left and right. Therefore, this race, I think, is never going to be in a situation in which either candidate is out of range of winning. So it doesn't really matter whether Donald Trump is down 5 points next week, but leading by 5 points the week after that. I expect the race to seesaw. Polling is an art form. There are good pollsters and bad pollsters. By that I mean there are accurate pollsters, and there are pollsters who make methodological errors in terms of...
Sure, to try to create the perspective that Hillary's really winning.
Well, some of them certainly are. The left-leaning polls, take PPP, for example. They'll never show the Republicans winning in any state, or they'll never show numbers that are...
Yeah, Hillary's 800 points ahead, according to them, yeah.
Yeah, but look, in all honesty, we're citing the Rasmussen poll today. I've been very critical of Rasmussen, Alex, because 4 years ago, he continued to take surveys without including Gary Johnson and Judge Jim Gray, two good friends of mine, in his ballots. And that's unprofessional. They were on the ballot in 48 states.
Absolutely. What can you tell us about internal polling? I know some of that's held close to the vest, but I've talked to some other folks. They say...
Well, look, here, all I can say, and I can't, and this is anecdotal, of course, and in no way formal, but it is my understanding that in certain swing states, acknowledging that Trump had a rough couple weeks, but I think has certainly turned the corner on that and is now back on the upswing, helped, ironically, by additional issues pertaining to international Islamic terrorism. In the several key states that you and I would both refer to as swing states, particularly some of the medium-sized swing states, Trump continues to lead, and all the others, he continues to hold his own. If you're in this race, if you're up 3 points, well, that's probably within the margin of error. Now, there is a problem of chronically sampling Republicans that I have seen in many of these mainstream polls. That's one way to cook the poll. Sometimes they oversample key Democratic groups. That's also a way to cook these polls. But so I just think any consumer out there reading the media who reads about the polls should take them with a grain of salt. Trump's own polling, and polling friendly to him, shows that he is certainly in a position to win this race.
You never gave me any Trump secrets. I mean, obviously, that's why you're a confidant. But you did a few times say, this is what you're going to see in Wisconsin. Well, this will be the real numbers. This is what you're going to see in this state. And you were just incredibly accurate every time. So I know you like to lowball things so that people don't get too optimistic. But I tell you, if he keeps getting more and more of these Reagan Democrats and people that have never voted, and I see the internet searches, Google can track this, are a lot of people that have never voted are now really getting involved and looking at Trump. And a lot of folks are also scared to say they're for Trump because of political correctness, but I think you're really going to go for Trump. I think you add that into the skew of the polls, and I think Trump really is. I think Trump's probably really about 5 points ahead. And I think if he keeps hammering and savaging Hillary, then he's going to end up maybe beating her in a landslide.
Well, that is, of course, the strategic imperative of his campaign. Look, Alex, if this election is about Donald Trump, then Trump will lose. But if this election is about Hillary Clinton, which it should be because it's a referendum on the past 8 years, and I think we all acknowledge her policies would essentially be a continuation.
That's right. Stay there. She's the establishment. It needs to be, hey, he's new, she's old. We need to get rid of her. She's guilty for where we are. Great point, Roger Stone. Stay with us. StoneZone.com is his website. He's got 2 books out on the Hillary Clinton's war on women and the Bush crime family and how they all work together. Absolutely. Talk about a referendum on the corrupt, rotten Washington establishment, and Trump coming out with that economic speech and saying Hillary is an agent of the Chinese. He said the Chinese are in a trade war with us, and she's an agent against us in that war, and the era of surrender is over. We're already in a trade war, and we're losing badly. This is pure veritas. Speaking on how Trump's really getting aggressive and suddenly surges in polls. And then let's get into what would Ronald Reagan think of Trump, because you knew both men very, very well and know Trump.
Well, Alex, first of all, I appreciate InfoWars publishing my piece, which makes the very case that Reagan and Trump were very similar in many ways, both unabashed believers in American power and American sovereignty, both nationalists, both outside the control of the Wall Street, K Street elite. Certainly, Reagan had his relationship with them, but he wasn't like Trump. He was an outsider. He came from a different discipline than politics, that being entertainment. But he also had the larger-than-life celebrity quality that Trump has. When you meet Trump, you know you've met a superstar. I mean, he has a presence that is filling arenas across the country in the last year. And like Reagan, I think Donald has ability to make himself understood. He talks in a way that people can relate to. Like Reagan, he talks in a way that working people particularly can relate to. Beyond that, he has a great sense of humor, as Reagan did. And he's a fighter. They were both fighters. When Reagan was on the verge of knockout in the 1976 campaign after taking beating after beating after beating by Gerald Ford, he stayed in the race when all of his top advisors, and I was a junior advisor, or junior staffer, but all of his top advisors and his wife were telling him to get out. You're done. Get out. Had he dropped out then in 1976, he would never have been the nominee 4 years later. It was only seeing it through to the convention and fighting it out and losing by a handful of votes that positioned him for the nomination 4 years later. So Trump has that fighter instinct, that he's a brawler. This guy can't wait to take on the left. And Hillary Clinton must know at this point that all of her crimes are going to be delineated by the Republican candidate, every single one of them, in terms that people can understand.
I mean, I know that Trump and Reagan had dinner at some dinners and had met each other. Do you know what Reagan thought of Trump, or did it ever come up?
Well, it's interesting. President Reagan, like President Nixon, who met Donald Trump in George Steinbrenner's private box at Yankee Stadium, both Reagan and Nixon urged Trump to run for public office. Now, in Nixon's case, he said, Donald, you might want to take a look at the governor's office first. But Trump, frankly, is too big for the governor's office. Or I should say the governor's office is too small for him. His focus has always been on national issues and international issues like trade. So, but it's interesting that 2 of the best politicians of the last 40 years both met Trump and urged him to run for public office.
Absolutely, but having Trump run and just be a governor, that's like Shamu at SeaWorld. It just doesn't fit. That's why it's animal torture in my view, and I'm not even a PETA supporter. We'll be back in 70 seconds with one more. This is crazy, Roger. I mean, I'm telling you, Trump, myself, everybody, this is the zeitgeist. We ought to just be celebrating that populism is being reawoken. Your view on the Brexit, how big a deal is that?
It's enormous. It shows that the new world order is being overturned and that the people are wising up. They're no longer sheep being led to losing their freedoms and their economic prosperity. So, Alex, first of all, as you know, I keep a rule book. It's called Stone's Rules.
Yes.
And it guides everything. It's the rules for politics and rules for food and rules for dressing. And one of my favorite rules is white shirt, tan face equals confidence. I got to tell you, back from vacation, you look like $1 million today.
You're a sweetheart, man. I tell you, you're something else. You're the king of style. I tell you, your suit looks even better than Josh Brolin's in Hail Caesar. And I think that's almost the same suit, but that is a sharp suit.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Today is, like I say, I'm on.
You're writing. I understand you're in your artist mode.
So quickly before today's broadcast.
Getting back to Brexit in the few minutes we have left, and then other tidbits we should know about.
Well, the globalists are in full panic now because their lives are no longer working. Trump gave an excellent trade speech yesterday. He is going to continue, I think, to decimate Hillary Clinton. Every day, new things are learned. Today, there is a story based on a blockbuster new book by Dr. Jerome Corsi that Clinton Foundation funds were used to pay for a vacation for Chelsea, a foreign vacation, used to pay Huma Abedin on the side while she was theoretically a full-time government employee, used to pay all kinds of improper expenses to augment the lifestyle of the epically greedy Hillary Clinton.
Can she withstand all this corruption and the Secret Service agents coming out against her and saying she's a demon? I mean, how can she stand?
Well, first of all, we see the material and we probably think that it is getting wider distribution than is true. The Clintons are still very adept at using their spin machine.
Oh, they've had you banned everywhere. In fact, that's my last point for you. I'm really noticing this more than ever. They know Trump gives them ratings, so they show short clips that aren't powerful, out of context, and then talk about him, but don't let him be heard. Are you seeing that more and more on the TV?
Well, we can't complain about the coverage of his entire speeches by the two cable networks, but what you say is particularly true of CNN. There has been a sharp change in CNN's programming after Trump wrapped up the nomination. Prior to that, while I'm not saying that they were advocates or patrons in any way, their coverage was somewhat fairer. But now, I think the Clinton News Network has kicked into high gear, and therefore their greatest fear is that Trump will be fully heard. If he is fully heard, they will lose.
Roger, we got 30 seconds left, stonezone.com. What other things are on your radar?
Well, we have to continue to look at the money situation. The gap between the Hillary super PACs and the pro-Trump super PACs is daunting. Hillary's got $50 million.
Listen, if you can't do it because you're writing articles, I understand. Can you do like 4 more minutes on the other side of this break? Because I want to ask you about just a message to Trump saying he should spend his own money. I want to get your view on that. Can you say 5 more minutes? All right, we'll be right back. Roger, is this high noon to Count Dracula? If we're able to get this info out to people, are they blocking Trump's speech?
Well, they're attempting to. The problem is that was very easy to do in the 80s when the Clintons had their political heyday because there were only 3 national networks. Cable TV was still in its infancy. The Internet was not nearly as developed. But today, consumers, in this case voters, have so much access to information that the true story of Bill Clinton's sexual assaults and the fact that he's a sexual predator and the fact that Hillary ran the cover-up and it was Hillary who directed the campaign to threaten and bully and intimidate his victims is going to become public. The facts about the death of Vince Foster. By the way, I don't think he was murdered, but I do think she ordered his body moved. We're going to learn the facts about the Clinton slush fund, the so-called Clinton Foundation, which is, the largest international money laundering conspiracy in world history, Alex. This is maybe a $3 billion fraud now. So those kinds of blockbuster facts cannot be suppressed by a feeble, outdated, mainstream media.
I agree with you. We're going to play that clip after you leave us here in a few minutes for folks that just tuned in. Part of the speech, what I think is the most powerful part. But isn't the establishment media filled with hubris, fueled with arrogance? Aren't they at risk of totally discrediting themselves and actually completely collapsing? I mean, the numbers show they've gone from 11 or 12% a few years ago in AP polls of the public trusting mainstream media to 6%. I mean, do they understand how they're really self-immolating? And could this election, for better or worse, for Trump, really be the demarcation point of the death of the dinosaur media?
Well, it is conceivable, Alex. Never underestimate their arrogance and their belief in their own power. And sometimes they do not have a recognition that that power is dwindling. So they tend to mock what they can't understand, and they don't know that communications today is in the new age.
They're savages.
It's arrogant. Then secondarily, of course, they have fewer and fewer and fewer voters and listeners as media becomes less diffuse, and the less listeners and viewers they have, the less influence.
Sure, and by savages, they're playing an old 70s, 80s, 90s disinfo game with just blatant lies, and they don't understand they're fighting in 21st century theater.
Well, and Trump understands how to garner publicity, free publicity in all mediums in a way that no one in our lifetime knows how to do. He is the greatest showman who ever lived. And
he's broken on through to the other side. Let's look at money then. I mean, obviously that's a problem. I mean, I don't see it as bad. He said, I'm not going to take big money. He wasn't really clear about it, but okay, he did that in the primary. No one's ever done that and won. He did it. But, I mean, it's not bad for him to raise money as long as he sticks to his platform, right?
Well, I think a couple things. First of all, money is not going to decide this race because no matter what Trump does, Hillary's campaign and the efforts of her wealthy patrons like Soros, they will always have more money. But hundreds of millions of dollars were spent against Trump in the primaries, and some well-crafted negative television ads were put up at velocities that should have an impact, but they simply haven't. The voters have wised up. So Trump needs enough money to be competitive. He doesn't need as much as she does, but he needs enough to fly the plane, to travel, to...
he needs the tactical, to like, say she puts out a disinfo ad at 10 to 1. The truth trumps that, pun intended. He just puts out the truth to respond, and then that gives him the ability to beat her. Is that what you're saying?
I am. I also urge anybody who's trying to understand the mind of Donald Trump to carefully watch his Twitter feed. He has said some things about globalism and Americanism this week, which I think are a signal to every patriot that he gets it.
Amazing. I'm going to let you go because I know you're busy. You just ran over from Trump Tower back to the house before you go back over and in some meetings. But Roger Stone joining us, StoneZone.com. What was the other point during the break you wanted to make? There was one other thing you brought up.
Well, Alex, I get many patriots keep asking me what is happening with the Cleveland rally. You will remember that this began as the Stop the Steal rally. You and I and others were booked to speak. And then after Trump wrapped up the nomination, we converted it to the American Unity rally. The city of Cleveland put forward a series of restrictions on our free speech, our right to assemble, so we could not do, guaranteed herding our people into a penned-off area with leftist thugs, so you would have had violence. Right now, so we went to federal court, Citizens for Trump, a fine grassroots organization that folks should sign up in, that is distinct from the campaign, but very well run and very effective, was the plaintiff. The left-wing ACLU represented us because they agreed that the restrictions by the city were unconstitutional. We won that lawsuit. They changed the safety perimeter from 4 miles out from the stadium to 1 mile, far more reasonable. But they continue to stall on our permit. Now they're telling us we need a union-approved soundstage, that we need special city permits for. What's going on here is the Democratic machine that runs Cleveland knows that the longer they can delay our ability to both raise money to pay for and rally bodies for this rally, they're enhancing the chances that it will not be a success. So they intend to give us our permits, I think, knowing that we'll go litigate again if we must, but that in the end they'll make their approvals so late that we will be precluded from having hundreds.
Yeah, they're running the clock on us. So everybody just be there. We're protesting for free speech. We're protesting against globalism. We're protesting against the Soros scum that's going to be bussed in. And everybody better be there, okay? I mean, this is, people talk about 1776 and you want to march on Washington and all this stuff. This is where you march. This is the fight. This is where everyone needs to be there, period. We're exercising our free speech, period. We need the bikers, everybody there. Don't wait for orders from headquarters. Go to the sound of the political guns. Roger?
Delighted to be with you, and I agree. So if you have plans to Cleveland, we'll see you there. I actually have a book signing at the Barnes & Noble in Cleveland for Clinton's War on Women, where I hope to see many old friends and some new ones. Alex, I know you're going to be speaking at a couple of events. Plus, you'll have a whole crew there. I'm really looking forward to this.
I'm looking forward to buying you dinner, buddy. Thank you so much, Roger Stone.
Thanks, Alex.